Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the General Purpose and Administration Committee meeting. I'll call this meeting to order and ask everyone to rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. There are no matters from closed session. Disclosure, pecuniary interest, and nature thereof. Does anybody have a pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Any announcements from Council? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just congratulations to Dr. Steve Russell and Lindsay and the organizers of the Hike for Hospice on Sunday. I know that there were a number of councillors there from here. So that's terrific. They're closing in on their goal of $6.5 million. They made $40,000 last year, and I think they're hoping to come close to that if they can for this year as well. So certainly a great endeavor, and it's working out very well for them. And also congratulations to the Rotarians for a great gala. And again, a number of you, including you, Madam Mayor, were at this event on Saturday night, and some of the money there goes to the hospice. So well done, everyone, and congratulations.
Thank you. Councillor Kiesebrink, then Councillor Watton, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say it was really fun to be at the grand opening of the Hearing Life last Friday. Their new location is 257 Queen Street, and actually if you pop in and you get your hearing tested, the hearing test is free, but there will be a donation that will be made into an account towards someone in need for hearing care for someone in need. They're actually experts in both noise protection and prevention, so it's not just for hearing aids. So it's a wonderful business, and it's a really good fit for our community. We're really glad to have this new business, so congratulations to all of them. Wednesday, May 8th is Stroller Fit program, so 9:15 till 10 o'clock, it's $14. It's a fun, effective, postpartum safe workout with your baby in tow, and they're actually using our beautiful Port Perry waterfront. And on that note, I wanted to say thank you to Director Carroll and also to Rob. We are so happy to see the sun, and we're happy to see our beautiful streets. The lawns are mowed so beautifully on baseball diamonds, and everything's looking really clean and great, so thank you so much for that. I think I actually saw our former Mayor, Marilyn Pierce, sitting in enjoying some ice cream sitting out on the street too today, so it's a great community, and we want to thank you guys for all the hard work that's gone into that. Also, one other announcement, the Port Perry Walk for Dog Guides is coming up Sunday, May 26th from 10 to 1 at Palmer Park.
Thank you. Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just further to Councillor Brown's announcement about the success of the gala, I'd also like to congratulate both Ronnie Nancy Compton and Marianne Fleming they were awarded the Paul Harris Award, which is a very prestigious award that comes from Rotary, and it acknowledges the individuals or groups or who make a significant contribution to our community. So they were quite humbled and very excited about it. So congratulations to them as well.
Thank you. That certainly was well deserved. We're very happy. Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to extend our congratulations to the Port Perry Tennis Club. Myself and several councillors were on hand on Saturday to help celebrate their 50th anniversary. We heard a lot of interesting stories, and sounds like if you have any spare time, that would be a good club to join, because it's not just tennis, so it's a great event for all ages. And upcoming on our long weekend is our 8th annual volunteer firefighters camp out on the rooftop of Anchor Point Fusion Restaurant. The opening ceremonies are at 5:30 on Friday, but we're going to pray for nice weather, and they will be there all weekend long with activities, and you can feel free to donate some money in the boot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements from Council? Councillor Brown?
Sorry, just one more, Madam Mayor, while I think of it. On Wednesday, it's McCappy Day, so last year I was in Uxbridge, and this year I'll be in Port Perry. I know Ginger and Sandy Jackson very well, and they do a great deal of wonderful things in the community, so come by for a free balloon. I'll be there at noon. Carol, I know, Director Carol, I know you would like a free balloon, so come by for a free balloon on Wednesday at the Port Perry location, and I'll also be in Uxbridge later on that day.
Not at me, no.
Yeah, the balloons will be there.
Yeah, I'm going to be there at 4. Councillor Guido, I understand you're there for the day. Are any of the rest?
Madam Mayor, yes, typically from 8 a.m. till Ginger kicks me out at about 7.
Do you get a free hamburger?
No. Serving at 9:30.
You're serving at 9:30?
We're helping out there.
And any others are going to be able to go? No. Okay, well, that's great. Councillor Brown, you did an excellent job emceeing the Rotary Gala on Saturday night. Thank you for doing that. It was a wonderful event, and in no small part to yourself. And it's been a very, very busy couple of weeks, and I want to thank those councillors that represented myself and the rest of council at different events when I was somewhere else. So thank you very much for doing that. Staff, any announcements? Chief, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Guido for that announcement, and just reaffirm that all of the firefighters will be there, full-time and volunteer. It's a very exciting weekend for all of them, and they raise monies for a good cause. And if last year's weather was the worst, it can only get better this week or this weekend. So it was rather wet last year, if you recall. Along with McHappy Day, the fire department will also be there, helping Ginger and her group raise funds for not only McHappy Day, but also for, it just passed me. Grandview Children's Center. Not only the Ajax site, but also the Port Perry site. Once Ms. Jackson meets her goals for the Ajax site, she's going to fundraise for the Port Perry site. So that's very exciting, very exciting. I'd like to also share with you that 8 new recruits for the Caesarea Fire Station have begun their recruit training. Again, another exciting time. Over the last 2 years, we've brought in approximately 20 new volunteers for Caesarea. So that's very exciting. It really, really is. Also, it's Emergency Management Week. And for those who follow me on Twitter, you'll see I tweeted that this morning. I encourage you to take a look at your being prepared, and if you're not, to go on the website I provide on my Twitter account to see where you can improve your preparedness. And then finally, I'd just like to, reassure you, Madam Mayor and Council and our citizens, that we are monitoring the water conditions. As you know, the north has been hit very, very hard, and the water is starting to move south. Fortunately for us here in Schuylkill Township, we're at the top of the headwaters for the Trent Severn system, and the warnings are in the lower waters of the Trent Severn system. So I'm very optimistic that it will flow past us. So
it's pretty high though right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other comments or announcements from staff? Seeing none, thank you. No delegations and presentations. Consent agenda. I have 9.2.3, the Waterfront Action Plan, and 9.2.4, Operating Budget Surplus pulled. Are there any others? Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 9.2.2, please.
Okay. Any others? Seeing none, could I have a motion, please, to adopt the remaining? Councillor Keith-Brink, Councillor Watton. Questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. 9.2.2, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a brief question in respect to the building, or the one business that does have fireworks sales in close proximity to a permanently placed refreshment vehicle or trailer. Has the affected businesses been notified that this may pass, or it is coming up to council, and have they had any feedback on that?
I got a firster and a seconder.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Guido. Yes, the affected business has been notified. They are currently looking for an alternative location.
Perfect, thank you. That's all, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you make the motion to...
Yes, I will.
Okay, seconded. Councillor Ross, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. 9.2.3, Councillor McDougall. This is the Port Perry Waterfront Action Plan request for proposals and the Port Perry Grain Elevator request for expressions of interest. Councillor McDougall.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to to receive both of those, and I'd like to make a motion to separate them for the purposes of discussion.
Okay, motion to separate. This motion is not to, you just want to make a motion to receive
Yeah.
at this point. Okay, and divide.
Yes, please.
Seconder? Counselor Ross? All those in, questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Your question or your, which one do you want to deal with first? The waterfront action plan?
Yes, I think that would be good. Just paging down to my questions here. Sorry. Electronic agendas, I love them. So, perhaps while I'm finding my questions, if there's anyone else who would like
Is
to
there anybody
say...
else that has a question on the waterfront action plan? Counselor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just while Councillor McDougall looks for his questions, on page 50 of our council agenda, in regards to the study area, does the circle, the yellow circle, is that including the boat launch in the property?
Director Heritage?
Councillor Heritage, wow. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, it does include the marina.
Right, but the boat launch is past the marina, it's past Birdseye, so I was just wondering, is it part of the subject area as well?
No, the circle is really conceptual circle.
Okay,
The extent of the study area is from Birdseye Park down to
downward,
Boston.
okay. And I was trying to decipher, in looking at that map, if that was the boat launch or not, the municipal dock there, but okay, thank you.
Counselor McDougall, have you found your questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor. They're buried in here, but one of the questions I had was with regards to, perhaps directed towards Director Heritage, the Class EA assessment that's being taken on by the Durham region for the water treatment pumping station.
Yeah, could you speak up, please?
Sorry.
I can't, I'm having trouble.
The water treatment plant there's an EA being taken on for the water treatment plant that's inside of the consideration area. How is that going to affect the overall planning for this whole space and timing?
Director Heritage?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. That Class EA is for the Water Street pumping station. It's not a treatment plant. So it pumps the sewage from this location up to the Nonquan water treatment plant. And in terms of the study itself, it will take that into consideration. The Class EA is being initiated this year, and they'll be looking at several sites in the vicinity, including the existing site, to increase the capacity of that sewage treatment plant. So the study that the township will be undertaking in terms of the waterfront action plan will take that Class EA into consideration.
Further, so if the pumping station, I should know better, if the pumping station were to be relocated, that would drastically affect the possibilities that could happen on the waterfront, I would assume. Is that fair to say?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, staff have had several discussions with the Regional Works Department, and the intent or preference is to have that sewage pumping station move from the existing site to another location to get it off the township's waterfront.
And so will this action plan take into consideration if this is relocated and not relocated? Similarly to the other structures that are on the site, we have a Latcham Center there as well. Is the action plan taking all of those moving balls, let's say, into full consideration?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Further? Councilor McDougall, have you got further questions? Okay. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, just touching on something that Councilor McDougall brought up, The previous waterfront action plan that was in past council was narrowed in scope. My understanding was to include the 4 buildings, including Latcham Center, the mill, and the parking area. And the reason we're going with this further is to broaden the scope. Is there a reason that the rowing club and boat launch are not included in this study going forward?
Director Heritage?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. The intent was to really look at from Birdseye Park down to Voss's, and there was no real intent to look at the boat launch at this point in time. The boat launch area may come up through further discussions if the Class EA for the sewage treatment, or the sewage pumping station, is located in the vicinity of that site.
Further, through you, Madam Mayor, is there a downfall to not including that at this point, or is there a reason, just so that we don't run into the same problem? I know come budget time, that was one of my questions, was why had previous council narrowed a scope and now we're looking at another study to widen the scope? Is it worth widening the scope any further, or is there restrictions why we need to keep it as tight as it is? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the council, it's certainly much larger than the original scope that was considered by the Phase 2 Steering Committee. As I said, the region's Class EA for the sewage pumping station may be including a couple of sites in that vicinity, which we would consider as part of this study.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Now there is a motion, the first part of the motion and the recommendations that report DEV 2019-014. Well, received, and divided. Okay, all right, sorry. So we'll move on to the next one, the request, expression of interest. Waterfront action plan. I'm sorry, okay. You confused me by dividing it. Okay, the second part of that recommendation was that staff be authorized to release the request for proposals and begin the process to retain a consultant to prepare a Port Perry waterfront action plan. And that's the separate one, right? Yeah, okay. So is there a mover for that? You have a question, okay. Well, let's get it on the floor first, okay? Have a mover for that, please. Councillor Watton, Councillor Brown. Questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this would just be just a general question. So now, with us putting out the request for proposal, which we really want to see, we want to see what is out there and what people's ideas are for getting this area utilized for our community. If a use comes forward that perhaps encompasses where the use or the, I don't know if the right terms are, the request for proposal, let's say that someone comes forward and they said, oh, well, we'd like to actually do a hotel, we'd like to use the mill, we'd like to use the land of the Latcham Center, and they have a proposal that's a little bigger in scope than what our current EA is for. Could we revisit it at that time? Like when the request for proposal comes forward, can we revisit what we need to do to be able to respond to that request? Is that what we're saying today to you, Director Heritage?
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. What staff is recommending is a request for proposals for the study area. It will include an examination of land uses throughout the study area. We will be conducting an extensive public consultation process. We'll be consulting with various groups, various committees to get their input, and then coming back to council with a recommendation for the waterfront.
Further?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So basically, at this point in time, we have a wonderful marina and our boat launch is being used. So we're basically focusing our efforts in the other area at this point. Is that where it sits?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Where it sits is between Birdseye and Voss's. There are a number of inputs here. We're looking at, and as outlined in the RFP, we're looking at the future of the marina, we're looking at the Latcham Center, we're looking at the old mill, We're looking at possibly in the long term, the ball diamonds. That was one of the recommendations coming out of the Culture Recreation Master Plan, to eventually, over the long term, replace the diamonds with alternative land uses. So there are a whole host of issues that we're looking at over the short, medium, and long term.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Director, what's the timeline for these items to be looked after? Like you said, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. What does short-term, medium-term, and long-term mean?
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Councillor, it hasn't been specified in the terms of reference. We've kept it intentionally conceptual at this point in time, but I can see within the next 3 or 4 years in the short term, and then up to 7, 8, 9 years in the medium term, and then long term beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
So in other words, if we do it piece by piece, some might get taken care of in the next couple of years, others may take longer.
That's correct.
Okay. Anything further? Councillor McDougall?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, thank you very much. When we're talking about the future of the marina, are you talking about, like, location of the marina, or what are we looking at?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, that's something that will be looked at in the study. We could be looking at additional uses that could be incorporated with the marina, the redevelopment of the marina, and so on. But that's something that will be looked at as part of the study.
Further through you, Madam Mayor, do you think it would be possible in the short term for us to address the trail conditions that exist on the waterfront trail right now along the Port Perry shoreline?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, that's something that we could look at.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I guess I'm assuming that the ball diamonds would be a possible long-term look, given the Lake Stewards project and everything else that's in flux from Palmer Park on south?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, that's correct. That was one of the recommendations I indicated coming out of the Parks Culture and Master Plan, that in the long term, we could be looking at relocating those diamonds.
Further, I had noted that housing was discussed in the report. I guess, is that looking at lands east of Water Street on the lakeside, or are we looking at the parking lot where the arena was?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, we're specifically looking at the parking lot that's owned municipally in behind the CIBC. That's part of the main central area, and there's a possibility of encouraging residential development in conjunction with commercial development on that site, as well as preserving the parking.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Heritage. So I'm just going to go back to my previous line of questioning, just had a chance to think it over. Is there any reason that we don't expand it? It's a waterfront study now. I just don't want to be stuck in the same position in 4 years, 3 years from now, having to put a, saying, oh, we didn't go too far. Is it your recommendation that we stop where it is for a particular reason, as opposed to encompassing the rowing club, boat launch, and boardwalk area? Is there an added price to going that far, or is there another reason that we don't go that far? Just looking at the map again, when you have the circle conceptually, that's what I'm thinking as the waterfront before you start hitting private property. Is it worth putting it into this recommendation, into the proposal at this point?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor. As I indicated, that's a conceptual circle that's going around the waterfront, and it was originally intended from Bird's Eye down to Voss's, but if Council wishes to extend it slightly to accommodate those additional lands, we can do that as well.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know if I have a position on it. I just want to make sure that we're not stuck in the position where we're not looking at the entire waterfront area again, and having to buy a new study to look at from Birdseye northbound to the end of the boardwalk. If we put it together, is there price involved? Is it beyond the scope of what we want to do? Just to add some input into making that decision.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the budget that's been allocated for this project is $90,000. So we'd be circulating this based on that premise, that we'd be looking at submissions in that price range for what we want to accomplish in this study.
So just to clarify, so would that, expanding it, the extra 500 meters, whatever, would that put us, in the world of throwing a proposal out there, would that put us over budget? Would we have to perhaps budget more for adding that extra land? Is that, just to clarify?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, at this point in time, I don't see that. I think this is an estimated budget for this study area, for the amount of work that will be required that's outlined in the RFP. I think it's reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Watt, and then I'll get back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the Director, am I correct in understanding that this waterfront action plan would quite possibly look at all these options that the councillors are bringing forward, i.e. the trails along the scope, the marina, and present us with different alternatives, or what would look good, or their recommendations? Am I correct in understanding that's the purpose of this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's the purpose, is to explore various alternative land uses for our waterfront, and in consultation with the public and the various groups, come back with a recommended land use scenario based on the three timelines that we're talking about.
Thank you. So based on that, we as councillors would also be able to afford our input to the consultants to help form those decisions, would we, or?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Kiesebrink?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So once we have a conceptual plan, then we can submit the RFPs, and we can get potential proposals from the public as to how they would like to potentially participate and have it locate their business there. So if we have our EA completed and everything is ready to go, that would expedite their ability to submit a proposal that we could then do. Is that a correct understanding?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we're doing a land use study here. We're not doing an environmental assessment. So once a plan is prepared, applicants could come forward with their proposals, absolutely, or they can provide their proposals as part of the study, as input to the study.
Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not to belabor the same point, but back to Councillor Watton's question, though, if it's not included in the scope, how would they know that we would want to even entertain the thought of trail consideration going northbound? Though I thought the whole point of having it included in the scope is so that they would understand the parameters. Otherwise, they could potentially leach out into the entire downtown area. So if we are considering as a council to expand it, would it not be at this point, at the beginning, before we start the process, where we would indicate our intentions?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, I agree with that. I thought the intent was to review the trail considerations within the study area itself.
So then we would need to make an amendment or some changes to what's included in the current
RFP.
draft?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there not already a trail? Like, is that not a recognized trail, like through Palmer Park and up through Old Rail Trail and the boardwalk, through up to Fleeler's gas station? That's already a trail, isn't it?
Madam Mayor, that was part of Phase 1 of the study that was undertaken, and the plans that were prepared for the waterfront, it identified that trail, and it's built.
Mm-hmm, that's what I thought. So I don't... Councillor McDougall?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure if you've traveled that trail, but it's actually not contiguous and it's in poor condition. The section that is through from North Street through to the boat launch is actually on the road and not marked. So I'm not sure if that's the intention of the trail or if that's how it was designed. I'm not familiar with that portion of the plan, but as to Angus's, or Councillor Ross's, considerations, I think he would like that considered in the trail area, as well as the trail sections that are north of the boat launch, through to where I think Rotary had built a gazebo and some other structures, are considerably underwater a fair bit of the season and not passable. So I think that is what Councillor Ross is considering, as well as the rowing access to, there's a quasi-rowing dock. I don't know if it's part of our plan as it's situated or not. So, just through the director.
Did you have a comment? Or Nancy?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yeah, the intent of the study or the RFP that's been prepared at this point in time did not anticipate going that far north in terms of reviewing land uses within the, along the lakefront.
I'm just wondering if the situation that you're speaking of could not be rectified by mapping it and signing it, rather than extending, because the trail is there. We just need to show it on a map and show it with signs. I don't know that we need to expand the area if the issue is about trails, because they are there. I'm at your will. Councillor McDougall?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a thought on this is actually, it might actually be captured in the active transportation plan that I think we're undertaking, if that's a question for Director Coleman.
Hey, any further questions? Councillor Ross?
Sorry, just to clarify, would that be captured under the active transportation plan, Director Coleman?
To you, Madam Mayor, to both councillors, the active transportation plan will be looking at missing links in our trail systems, and if one can be accommodated off-road in that location, that would be part of it, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kiesebrink?
So then, Madam Mayor, in summary of all of our conversations, that then perhaps addresses the trails. Does it address what Councillor Watton and Councillor Guido were saying with respect to encompassing the boat launch areas and marina areas as a part of the scope of the study? That would be my question back to everyone.
Director Heritage?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, certainly the marina is part of the study area. The boat launch is a little further north, but I indicated that that area may have to be looked at in terms of the Class EA that's being undertaken by the Region of Durham, if that's a potential site or in proximity to that area for a new sewage pumping station.
Director, or CAO?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If council would like the study area expanded to include the boat launch, we can make that adjustment. And then we'll, if it does have an impact on the cost, so we'll bring that back when we get return on the RFP. Initially, the idea was to look from Birdseye Park, and there are some trail connections missing within Birdseye Park for sure. And I do agree the trail connection from basically North Street to the boat launch is absent, but something that's on our mind to have rectified. But the idea was from Birdseye Park over to Voss's, seeing that that's the waterfront area that interfaces with the downtown. And you probably noticed in the RFP document that we've included how the downtown from Perry to Queen and along Water Street from 7A to North interfaces with the waterfront. And we're hoping there'll be some recommendations for that area too, because we are pretty unique in how our downtown interacts with the waterfront, and it's, of course, an economic driver for our downtown. But just in summary, if council would like the boundary expanded, I would not suggest we go further than the boat launch, just because I think that other area, although needs some improvement, as you say, Councillor, I think can be taken care of just through maintenance and such. but we could add the boat launch and make sure that we're all inclusive in the study area. And if you'd like that done, we'll make those changes and send the RFP out that way.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, we have a motion on the floor to authorize the release. My suggestion would be, if you wish to make any changes to that, you amend the motion. Councillor Ross.
Great. To clarify, through you, Madam Mayor, Stuart, do we require amendment to change the study area, or will that be included in the staff report?
If we can take it as direction of council, if you'd like, and we'll just amend the document to make sure it's clear. It includes the boat launch, from the boat launch to Bosses.
Thank you. Thank
Do you
you.
wish to make that as direction? Is that okay, Mr. Clerk? Take that as direction?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to council, I don't know what the previous direction of council was in terms of... It was this.
Mhm.
So if you've already got a direction of council to do just this portion, I would suggest just add it to this motion to say include the boat launch, because otherwise staff are then doing something that is not being passed by motion of
Okay.
council.
All right. That's why we have a clerk. Okay. So, Councillor Ross, did you wish to make that amendment?
Yes, I'll make an amendment to adjust the scope of the study to include the boat launch.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Kieserbrink. So it's this motion amended to, so on the amendment, all those in favor? That's carried. The amended motion. Do I have a mover for that? No, I don't. The amended motion? That's the waterfront, okay. I'm sorry, yes, okay, so the original motion, now amended, was made by Councillor Watton and Councillor Brown. You're good with the amended? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you very much. Okay, the second part of the, of this report is the authorizing the release of requests for expressions of interest related to the adaptive reuse of the Port Perry grain elevator. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Brown, Councillor Watton, questions or comments? Councillor Guido? Did I see
Thank
your
you.
hand, Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a few questions. On page 70 of our council agenda, in respect to the leasing terms and conditions, my first question is on the 20-year duration. If some of us recall, a few years ago, we were discussing the length of lease for the marina, and we didn't necessarily want to entertain a very long-term lease for other reasons. But I'm just curious as to why we chose 20 years, and I appreciate the fact that there's going to be a huge capital investment that the leasee will have to take. But 20 years seems like an awfully long time for us to enter into a lease agreement. Is this a typical duration that we would see?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's exactly why we were looking at a long-term lease, because of the capital investment that an applicant or a leasee would require to put into the structure in order to operate. So that's why there was a lengthy lease time. And that lease would be commensurate on the amount of money that would have to be put into the structure. If the leasee was looking at putting in an extensive amount of money, we would consider reducing that lease substantially, but that would come forward to council.
And the 20-year term, was that given to us on guidance from realtors or legal, or is that just what we determined would be an appropriate duration?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's what staff is recommending as an appropriate length, based on the commitment that a leasee would make in providing the capital investment into that structure.
Okay, and the only reason I asked, I was just curious if any realtors had been approached to have this conversation to ask, because many of them in town at least deal with leases, to see if that is a typical term of time. And then my next question, on the same section, it says, "The long-term lease to be considered will be commensurate with the current commercial market lease rates." Who's determining that? And are we getting 3 values provided to us?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. That's an issue that we've had discussions with local real estate people in the area to get an approximate commercial market lease rent or rate. We can certainly clarify that and bring that forward when a proposal comes forward and deal with it in that manner.
I'm not speaking on behalf of council, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I would feel far more comfortable if we had at least 3 realtors provide us their evaluation of what the market rate would be on that value. I just think we owe that to our taxpayers to ensure that we're getting what is the current value of any other property downtown.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, we could certainly get that for 3 values or 3 quotes for commercial rents.
Take that as direction?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We do have long-term leases, I believe, with Town Hall 1873. I'm thinking it might be a 99-year lease, but I can't be, is that correct? Okay. So it is something that has been done. I think it's $1 or $2 a year. They run it and...
Okay, thank you. My next question is on the review process. It says the township will consider the submissions. Does that mean that council is not privy to all submissions that are being submitted?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to council. Council will be advised of the submissions that have been submitted to staff for consideration.
Okay, and will we be advised of all submissions that are received, even if they're ones that we wouldn't consider?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, and then who's determining which ones would be viable? Says, the township at its sole discretion will decide which, if any, of the applicants to accept. Is that based on council recommendation, or is that staff direction?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it would be based on staff's recommendation in a report that would come forward to council for approval.
Okay, so council will be the one approving?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Heritage. Just in reading the expression of interest report here, have we looked at the sale of the grain elevator as opposed to the lease of it and its attributes?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. For the majority of the old mill's life, it has been held in private ownership. And only recently, in the last, I think it was in 2011 or 2012, that the township purchased that site. And in dealing with the previous council, it was always the intent that the township would retain ownership of that property and keep it in public ownership. So that's how we're moving forward. The staff's recommending to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Just in follow-up...
Just, I think,
Pardon me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could maybe add to that, it's a very interesting question, one I appreciate. This process, as you know, is based on the township retaining ownership of the building and finding a tenant. And of course, the reason it's a long-term tenant is because of the cost that required just to make it occupiable, about $750,000. Right now, it is unoccupiable. Cannot be used. That is the old mill proper. So the first premise is, could we get a tenant that would pay that $750,000 and in turn have a long-term lease where that investment that they've made could be proportioned over the lifetime of the lease. And as Councilor Guido said, we would get an accurate indication of what these should be for that building, and then figure out whether they still pay rent or whether this is a wash at the end of the 20 years. I'm not sure, and that's what the review will do. But saving that we don't have interest, or we don't have interest that's acceptable to council, I think the matter that you brought forward, Councilor Ross, should be, like a next step consideration. We have a building that needs substantive work. You could still do what you're mentioning, and the township could still retain full control, including ensuring its long-term heritage, maintaining its long-term heritage designation and maintaining its heritage character, but maybe get a sustainable use for the building. But we feel this is a first step, maintain ownership, see if we can get a repurposed use for the building, and see if it can be done through this way. Not saying we will find an acceptable tenant, but what we're proposing is a first step in the process. Maybe that's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'd just like to add, the sale or the purchase by the township was in my first term here, between 2003 and 2006. And the purpose for purchasing it was to have all of the waterfront in township ownership. So just take that for what it is. That doesn't mean it has to be for eons, but that's the date, and that was the purpose. Okay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Anything further?
If I could just appreciate that, CAO, thank you. What, timeline-wise, what are we looking at as far as expressions of interest coming forward? At what point do we reassess the package that we have? I know I had a chance to sit in with the Heritage Committee when some things were discussed as far as, let's see what we get at the first part, and then reassess at a certain point, and maybe we need to make modifications in regards to, the west part of the building or what have you. What are the time gaps that we're looking at? And then perhaps when do we reassess lease versus sale? At CAO or to the Director?
Director?
Thanks, Paul. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor. I would suggest that once Council authorizes staff to release the expression of interest, that we give potential applicants approximately a month to respond to that expression of interest. And then once we receive the packages, we will review them, prepare a report, and bring that report forward to Council for consideration with a staff recommendation.
So through the Mayor, I think what Director of Heritage is saying is that by early fall, mid-fall, we would have something for Council. And then, and based on what we have, then there'll be a decision of whether this is good enough to proceed or whether Council wants to move in another direction. And at the same time, we'll have a really good idea of how the waterfront plan is moving along. So there's so many things in motion downtown on the waterfront. You've got your community improvement plan that's going to kick off in September. You've got the EA, yes, for the sewage pumping station. And then you have the waterfront plan, you have the old mill. So there's a lot of things in motion that are happening simultaneously. So they're going to feed off and inform each other as we move forward.
We asked for it as council. We wanted to get things going, and that's what we're doing.
If I could at a point, thank you, Madam Mayor, is that I know this goes without saying, but on the strategic plan priorities, the waterfront was identified as the number one by council. In fact, number one priority.
Okay, further, Councillor Ross?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Kiesebrink?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, first of all, a comment. With respect to the 20-year lease, I do think from a business perspective, that is an important component to keep in as it is. The reason being that normally when a business is going to put significant investment in a location, it's typically when they purchase the building, and then they make those improvements. In this case, because the township, we're first seeking RFPs with respect to the township retaining ownership, we're going to end up with potentially a business locating themselves in this building and a huge amount of investment up front. They may need to arrange financing, and from a financing perspective, the lender is going to look at the stability, the long-term business plan, and they're going to say, well, you've got a 20-year lease, it's with a municipality, that should be pretty stable, and I think that they may have a better shot of being able to pull their whole business package together if we give them that to work with. It's not to say that we've made our decision, but at least it gives us a chance chance to see what's out there and see what might come forward. So that's just a comment. A question, I noticed in the minutes of some of our other reports in the past that there was questions about removing the side sections of the mill, and I'm just wondering, is there any, there's no plan to do anything in that regard right now, is that correct, to our CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not at this time. The studies that have been done to date do say that the westernly portions of that unit will be demolished, and that was to get that back to sort of the original character and structure of the building. They were add-ons, so nothing is coming forward. That would come forward to council, of course, and there's nothing before us or that we're bringing forward in that regard at the moment, and I'm sure will be part of the expression of interest and the waterfront plan that are moving simultaneous.
Further to that, so if an expression of interest came forward to use the mill and use those side pieces as a part of the whole thing, then we can still entertain that, or we cannot?
Yes, absolutely, through the mayor. In fact, I would anticipate that in the expression of interest speaks to that. In terms of the proposal, what was envisioned there, of course, was for those units to come down, for the awning to be put back on, sort of match its original character somewhat, if not the same, and that there be a bit of a public square established at the foot of Queen Street in that area. And that's been in the long-range planning, many studies over the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown, then Councillor Watton.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, just a comment, I think the western side is not heritage too, which has something to do with the fact that it can be demolished, otherwise the rest of the building can't be touched that way. And I'm not sure who to ask this question to, whether the CAO or the director, but, so you can pick one. Can you streamline, for people want something done with the mill, they've been waiting years for something, it looks like we're gonna do it. So can you streamline best case scenario in this particular instance to have somebody in that building operating it, or operating a business inside that building? How long is it going to take to do it, and what can people look forward to? Because people ask about it on a regular basis. What's going on with the old mill? So we've got a plan, but can you streamline a perfect timeline? How long do you think it would take if everything fell into place nicely?
No pressure.
Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Well, I can try it.
Okay, go for it.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor.
Director.
If we're looking at a study, and it's outlined in the study that it's an 8 to 10 month study. And in terms of the expression of interest, we're probably looking at the same timeline. There's going to be a substantial amount of work, as indicated in the expression of interest, to upgrade that building, to make it habitable and to bring in a use. In terms of a use going in there, I would imagine about 2 years.
Go ahead.
So can I understand that we could have some kind of a business operating out of the old mill in 2 years from now?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. CAO?
To your merit, no, I think that's a conservative estimate. I mean, I'm the president of the Optimist Club, and I'm hoping we can move a lot quicker. But I think Mr. Heritage is probably right in giving that caution. There are a lot of things to consider here. Negotiating the lease when it comes back, and there are substantive improvements needed to the old mill. $500,000 in structural upgrades and building envelope upgrades, demolishing of portions of the mill. So I think that's a fair estimate on the outside if everything moves along right.
Thank you. Councillor Watton and Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And further to the CAO's comments about the existing retail units, I do note on page 69 it said that the expression of interest shall include the removal of the existing retail units located on the west side of the elevator. So I'm wondering if that is not completely the intent, or we want to leave it open if we need to reword that in this expression of interest before it goes out.
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's been our understanding from past work on this with council, that they were to come down, and we wanted the proposal to recognize that that's the fate of those units. If council feel otherwise, I guess now would be the time to tell us. But we would be looking for a proposal that would take those down and put the awning up and proceed on that basis.
Yeah, I like that idea. Not only that, it's my understanding that they do not meet the building code, and so there's a substantial amount of work needed to be done to bring it to code before it can ever be used again, and there's accessibility issues as well. Is that correct, Director?
That's correct. One other comment too, in conjunction, in addition to what the CAO had indicated, that any more money going into those western units will delay or preclude the development of a public square in that vicinity. So that is something else that perhaps council should keep in mind as well.
Okay. Was that your question, Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was, I just have a follow-up to it, just to provide some context to. I know, through you, Madam Mayor, during the Heritage Committee meeting we had, that was one of the proposals that they had, is change the wording of that to shall. Does that, to Director Heritage, does that decrease the optimization of the mill, having the word shall in there? If we have, regardless of price or of what has to actually happen in that unit, is it worth having the wording so tight so that if someone comes in and says, I want these western units, and I'm willing to pay for it, and I'm willing to go ahead with it, is it worth loosening that up again? I know we just went to shall from something less.
Director Heritage?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Just going back to some of the background studies that have been done on the old mill, the structural assessment that was undertaken by Greer Galloway did not consider the western units because the scope of work that was released by the township indicated that those western units would be demolished. So further structural assessment would have to be undertaken to ensure that the structural integrity of those units would be appropriate to accommodate any future uses. And as I said, it would, if any further money or additional money is going into those western units, it would preclude the ultimate development of a public square in that area.
Mr. Theo?
If I could add, as Councillor Brown had indicated, they do not have heritage value, and if they remain, they preclude the possibility of having a public square. That has been planned for through various studies over the last many years.
Councillor Ross, finished? Okay. Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've forgotten my question. Oh, sorry, I do remember now. Mayor Drew had indicated accessibility needs were not necessarily met. We learned last week, or whatever, the Muellers were here, about Chapter 11, I believe it is, of the building code, when that bypasses the need to meet current building code if it was built prior to a building code being available or followed. Because it will receive renovations, does that mean once you renovate it, it will then need to comply with the code?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, that's correct.
Okay, so as long as it is right now, it can stay as is, but as soon as we renovate it or anyone renovates it, they must comply with the building code?
That's correct.
And bring it up to date?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's very important for us to realize that if you remove the western units, you're going to have a nicer town square. I think the plan for the town square, from what I've seen, is very effective and will be a real draw for the people of Port Perry and for those from outside Port Perry. I think it's vitally important to understand that it's going to be, unless I miss my guess, and please tell me I'm wrong if I am, but the removal of those units is part of the plan to have a central square at the end of Queen Street.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important we keep it going that way.
Okay. Councillor McDougall?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I guess my first question I'd like to ask is, well, actually, the first question I'd like to ask is in terms of our priorities. I thought our number one priority was our roads and not actually the waterfront. I believe this would be our number one nice-to-have priority. Given that costs are...
Different category.
Different category of priorities. Okay, so now that we've established this is our number one nice-to-have priority, I am very sensitive to costs, and I appreciate us trying to hang on to the mill and develop it in a sensitive manner. When we're looking at the leasing of the mill over a long period of time, we had previously leased the mill through the municipality, and I believe the number was for $125,000 a year for a total of all the tenants that were present. If we're looking at a 20-year lease, that would be roughly 125 times 20 would be about $2.5 million, and I believe we're looking at about $750,000 improvements. So I'm assuming that we would be looking at a return somewhere in the $2.5 million mark minus the $750,000. Is that fair for consideration purposes? Through to Director Heritage.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor. I've got some figures regarding the leasing amounts that we received between 2010 and 2012, and they're around $100,000. I think you would indicate about $125,000. Yeah, the total is about $100,000.
Okay, through to you, thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. So my numbers might be a little high, but we should be expecting some form of rent. Would we be capping the amount credited back to the proponent in terms of the improvement?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, yes, that would be part of the lease agreement with the applicant or the leasee.
Very good. And then further, would the lease be with the applicant, or would the lease be to the applicant with the possibility of subleasing?
Director or CAO?
I think it's really, we need to see what the proposal is. At this time, I think we're looking for a tenant for the building. And I also think the lease amount is, again, we need to see the proposal is based on what improvements they're prepared to make, what type of adaptive tourism commercial use they're bringing to the downtown. All these need to factor in, I think, to the final decision, and we'll only know that when we go out and we get a response to our expression of interest request.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Further, the eastern section that's on the mill, would that be retained or will that be removed?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, my understanding is it would be retained at this point in time.
Sorry, just for clarification, so the piece that fronts towards the Latcham Center will be retained?
That's my understanding at this point in time.
Okay.
Further? Councillor McDougall? Further?
No, that's good for now, thank you.
Seems to me that part on the east was built on later, but still part of Heritage is my understanding. I'm not sure. No? But I know it was built later, but not as late as the ones on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that came from Mr. Stone. Okay?
It's in poor condition.
Anything else? Councillor Keysebring.
Just one more. So we're going to be looking for an opportunity for someone to utilize the whole mill. So that would include like an upper floor, like the height of the mill could be utilized. We're barring the sections on the side, but they would be more than welcome to put forward a proposal that would encompass the whole mill, including the height of it as well. Is that a correct understanding?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor. In terms of the height, the bins, there are a number of bins that encroach in terms of the height, and the bins have been identified as a heritage element in the Heritage Value Statement that has been adopted by Council to designate it under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So no, you can't take advantage of the height.
Okay. Anything further? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to Councillor Brown's point, I think we're on the same page here, is that getting this expedited and getting something done is a priority and moving forward. If we receive an expression of interest that somebody wants to use the west buildings or doesn't want to use the eastern buildings, how much movement do we have? Will we evaluate those as they come forward and look at them on face value? Or if it doesn't, if it says, well, we want to keep the western buildings and we'll maybe, you know, thinking outside the box, we have a different idea for a town square or whatever, how much movement will there be in this REI? Just to, in terms of expediting it, getting her done, and moving on.
Director?
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor, staff would evaluate that and bring it forward to council, so there could be some movement. We'd have to evaluate each of the submissions and then bring them forward to council.
I guess being an expression of interest rather than a tender or anything, there's some flexibility, is that,
Absolutely.
Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Councillor Brown?
Just through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's, and maybe I've underlined it already, I think it's vitally important that we do follow through on this and that we do it as expediently as possible. I think people realize that we've taken, as a council here in past years as well, a long time to get to this point, maybe longer than we should have. So let's, as Councillor Ross says, let's get her done.
Okay, thank you. Everybody's spoken at least twice except for Councillor Watton.
I
so
have not spoken
you're
twice.
going to go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I have not spoken twice, so I'd like to speak twice now. I can wholly concur that having tenants at the bottom of Queen Street is vitally important. I hear it from the Main Street merchants, I hear it from the tourists. I regret that the previous whoever removed the tenants from the building, and I can see how that was a difficulty in terms of why and how, but it's taken a long time to be able to get tenants back in the building, Councillor Brown, and many of those reasons are because the tenants were removed and we now have
No.
building code restrictions that apply.
Councillor McDougall, they were not removed. Those tenants that were there saw that at some point in time that they were probably going to be kicked out. And so as opportunities arose for a different location, they took it.
Okay, very good. Having the building empty has created some problems for us in terms of reestablishing tenancies. Having said that, we took quite a bit of time in being part of the Waterfront Council, or Waterfront Committee, in trying to establish a proposal for the mill that would be acceptable. I certainly see the value in the mill being retained publicly. I see it every single day on Instagram and Facebook as a backdrop for photos, and currently it's being used. So it is not costing us near as much as it was in terms of the past, and I would like us to see it retained in public ownership if possible. I would just like to make sure that whatever comes forward in terms of a lease agreement is fair to the public, and that it is leased at fair market rates, and that we see the improvements done in such a way that seek that they're done in a historical manner that meet the building code to keep it upgraded in terms of how we need it. I think that's all I would like to say on this at this time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think we're basically all in agreement to move ahead and have a look at the expressions of interest that come in, and because they're an expression of interest, there's some flexibility on how to proceed, and we'll take the best offer. Okay. No further questions. The motion is there that we release the request for expressions of interest. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're moving on to 9.2.4 on page 74. It's the operating budget surplus, and Councillor Kiesebrink, you pulled that one. And that is on page 74.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to Director Valentin, just to clarify, so we're proposing that we take of our resources that are surplus, we want to put 20% back into roads and other infrastructure, which is $203,831. Just to look at the report, it appears that our roads, that they saved $219,000 but we're only giving them back $203,000. So on the outside, it kind of looks like we're taking a little bit of what they've saved and then we're spreading the rest around everywhere else. But is it correct, just as I'm reading through your report and all of the work that was done, am I correct in understanding that actually there was $158,125 that were actually, because of the weather last year and what have you, that we went ahead and used last year's budget and purchased inventory ahead of time that we could still use this year? So if in fact we add that money to the overage of $203,000 that we're giving back to roads, then in reality we're actually giving $361,956 to roads and roads-related infrastructure if we take into account the value of this increased inventory that's carried over to this year, as well as the cash that we're putting into reserves. I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly.
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, to Councillor Kieserbrink. So, what had happened last year, the weather didn't cooperate with our works crew, and they did purchase additional gravel and sand and salt, additional materials, up to the value of the budget, it's my understanding, but they couldn't utilize it. From matching principles of accounting, we cannot recognize those as expenses in the financial statements because they haven't been utilized for the purpose. So they do sit over in inventory. So the value actually of roads, it was an increase in inventory this year, as you'd stated, of $158,000. The value that is sitting in inventory, the total value, is over $300,000. So that is available for work staff to utilize this year for roads works.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McDougall.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. So to clarify, the aggregate that was purchased in 2018, will that be a 2018 expense, or will that be coming out of the 2019 budget?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're closing our 2018 books, so that will not come out of 2018. The books will be closed. They'll be recognized. They have to be recognized in the year that they're utilized. So if they didn't utilize it in 18, it can't be recognized in 18.
So the budget that was purchased in the fall will actually come off the 2019 granular budget then?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it will be identified as an expenditure in 2019. It won't come off the budget. They still have the budget to work with.
It's a good thing.
Oh, okay.
Difficult to understand, but it's a good thing. It's an accounting issue.
Yes.
Basically.
So we have our 595 or 93 in the aggregate, plus the 88 that we have as well?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, that's all.
Anything further? Councillor Kieserbrink?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment. We're just really appreciative of all the work that's gone into all the reporting. We appreciate that, and it's wonderful that these efficiencies have been realized and that these resources can be added back into these reserve accounts and shore those accounts up. Roads does get some good funding from federal gas tax and also for the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, but some of our other assets in our asset management plan don't have specific funds allocated to them. So we want to thank all of the staff, everybody who's worked hard to realize these savings. Some of the savings were unintentional when there's turnover of staff and so on, but others of them were very intentional savings, and we appreciate that. So it's great to be able to see these resources now put into these other asset areas that are really critical for the future of us having a really balanced budget and a responsible budget. So we thank you for that, and thank you for this report, Director Valentin.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further? Thank you very much. Did you want to move that, Councillor Kieserbrink? Seconder? Councillor McDougall? All those in favor? And that's carried. And councillors, you can thank yourselves as well as staff, because we passed the reserve policy that in December 10th. So, and it seems to be working well. Thank you. So moving on, there's no correspondence, no notices of motion, no new business. We don't have closed session, so I am looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Kieserbrink. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Well done.